If you're interested in something for utilitarian reasons, you are not exploring it at all. You're not learning it. You're borrowing it for short-term application and then forgetting about it. One of the things that people must do as a bucket list item is find themselves in a culture by themselves where everything is the opposite. Everything. Like everything's the opposite. And then figure out that, oh shit, all of this works. I've been on record like shooting down ideas like NoFap, right? And I'm happy to shoot those ideas down every day for the rest of my life.
Welcome to Take a Pause with me, Varun Duggi. And this is actually a continuation. This is part 2 of my chat with Prakhar Gupta. And this part, we dug deep into psychology. We dug deep into so many aspects of our minds and how we function and so much more. So before we get into that, I want to make sure you hit subscribe and smash that bell icon. I'm going straight into my chat, or rather my continued chat with Prakhar. Because we went down this conversation on psychology, and that's an area which I remember that you and I did this phone call where I'm super interested in this space. I never realized I would be as interested in it. But if you had to kind of look at why it's so much more a part of broader, I would say, YouTube conversation, I like to call it that, YouTube or like content conversation today versus ever before, why do you think we're more interested in psychology today than we were before?
First of all, base statement, I would make some edits to it before I agree with it. The other
100%.
thing is, bro, I don't think, like, this is my experience, frankly, anybody I've ever spoken to really understands what they're saying when they're saying psychology. And I don't even mean this in like I'm telling you, it's like a glaring error. It's not even any fine point that I'm trying to make. Okay.
Yeah.
So like you said, a little while ago, philosophers, you might be reading philosophy, but you might go in a direction if you read it like that, something akin to that.
Yeah.
Why is philosophy limited to what Heidegger and Socrates say? And why is psychology limited to what the academic psychologists say?
Correct.
Right? So, first of all, there is something called folk psychology, which we do anyway, which is shit we tell each other about. Oh, this is how people think. This is folk psychology, been happening forever. In fact, a lot of the systems in our culture were based on folk psychology. A lot of this appearance culture we spoke about is based on folk psychology. It's based on honor culture, for instance. Right? So, it is not that people are suddenly more interested in that. What people are more interested is the religion of self-help. It's a church. It's established right outside here, outside my house where I live. There is a huge bull with its balls that people like to touch for some awkward ritual. And that is the manifestation of the god of self-help. Make the cash go up. This is the sort of, the narrative.
Yeah.
And so, it's been, when people tell me Prakhar does psychology, I'm very rarely quoting any academic psychologists. I'm very rarely also talking about any kind of folk psychology. I'm trying to venture my own guesses in some sense of how humans behave, right? Spiritual psychology.
You're talking about your own insights.
Yeah, I'm talking about what I have. Same way with philosophy. Sometimes I'll quote like, this is also what they said, by the way. I will talk about authenticity and then I'll get to Westphalen and Dasein from Heidegger later, right? That is something I use as a connect later on. But most people, like I've had people walk up to me in parties, be like, bro, tu psychology padta, before content, by the way, tu psychology padta hai yaar, mera breakup ho gaya, help kar de. Kya baat hai ye? Like, how do I solve that? Bro, मेरे को सिगरेट छोड़नी है तो कुछ psychology से बता दे. ये थोड़ी पढ़ाते हैं किसी को कोई. This is not what like psychology is supposed to be. Academic psychology as a matter of function is so removed from everyday decision making of an individual because it is a statistical science. It'll take into account everybody and then 60% of the result shows this. So you are more likely to do this is what it'll say and leave it at. But you're an individual. You could very well be in the 40%. You could be in the 40% millions of times. It is not a commentary on how you must behave at all. Like people have that concept so like jumbled up in their head. So why we are interested right now is because somebody has told somebody and everybody else has believed that if you figure out how other people behave, you can hack your way up. And this is hack culture.
Mind.
This is hack culture, bro. This is your self-help genre of like strict motivation and like that entire area where the problem has.
This is how you can get flow. This is how you can get.
Yeah, bro. The problem hasn't been considered in its depth. Like what I'm fond of is not mincing the depth of the problem of life itself, of existence itself. It begins with the existential. So people are interested in it for selfish reasons. People are interested in it for utilitarian reasons. And if you're interested in something for utilitarian reasons, you are not exploring it at all. You're not learning it. You're borrowing it for short-term application and then forgetting about it. So it's not like that's helping either.
Yeah.
But what people want essentially is more happiness, more money, more status. And they think psychology is a means of acquiring it. So very often they go after that. And if you say 5 psychological tricks to impress a woman, bro, like that's a readable title most men I know cannot resist. So let's be honest.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a credibility word. It's a status word.
That is so true. And I think about my own journey towards, so I'm going to reframe. Maybe I won't use the word psychology. I'm going to say that I've been intrigued to learn how my own mind works and why I am the way I am. And this journey for me started, I think it accelerated in the pandemic, because I was just like, okay, why am I like this? I need to figure this out. Much before that, I'd gone for some therapy. I don't think I did it as seriously as I should. And therapy is where it started for me. But what I started to do, I would say late 2020 onwards, is really studying, okay, I need to understand some tropes which I have. So I'd go down rabbit holes. I'm like, one thing, I can't just Google shit, because that's the worst thing to do. Just don't go on YouTube and do it. Let's find someone who's actually written something about this. And I agree that self-help is a tricky one. There's that line between what is self-help and what is social science, to an extent, if that's the area to go, where you will have people who are experts in certain domains who are writing about this. But the day it becomes, if you do this, you will succeed, then you know you're going to self-help. Versus you go to, okay, this is a study, these many people were assessed, and this is what they found. I feel that's more research than this. The problem is most people go towards this foolproof, 100% guarantee. Is like I got a hair transplant, which I openly talk about a couple of years ago. One of the things that sold me was a 20-year guarantee. Like 20 साल बाल नहीं गिरेंगे, fuck it, take my money, give me my hair, right? Same thing with understanding your own mind. Is like, okay, you give me a foolproof way to say, I will learn how to get confidence, I will learn how to get into flow, everything else. Versus, this is what happens in multiple cases, and this is what you can maybe infer from it. The word, I think, the infer part is where we are like, infer is too much work.
Infer
Give me
is
the
too
answer.
much concept also. What does infer mean?
Yeah.
What is an inference? What is induction and what is deduction? Right? Like, see, the reason why, this is my feeling, bro. Tell me if I'm stupid and wrong. Okay? I feel like you cannot go about living a life if you've not articulated these underlying things. Because you're inferring on a day-to-day level. How do you know if you're inferring properly or not? Because you need to understand
Correct.
what the basics of that is. So, I feel like psychology has very rarely got a direct application in your day-to-day life as a whole, bro. Very honestly. Like, there is a few things for sure, broad concepts like cognitive dissonance will help a lot. Right? That say if you smoke cigarettes, start telling people you won't smoke, and now the next time you smoke, the guilt is going to make you want to not smoke, and maybe that'll help. Like, there is stuff like that, that broad concept shit, like super ego and id, great idea to have, great model. The fact that there is a conflict in your head, at least between two people. Some people might say it's more than two, but at least between two, the should and the want. However, very little of what happens in psychology books happens in life, and too much of what happens in books and movies and art happens in life. So the right place to go if you're looking for how to understand how people behave, etc., is literature, bro. Go to Dostoevsky. Go to Raju Hirani, bro. But if you're trying to get to like bloody, I don't know, a modern like Daniel Kahneman. Oh, actually Daniel Kahneman's a bad example, because he gave broad principles that sort of help as well. But say you're going to Scott Barry Kaufman, also one of my professors, love him. It's probably not the best place to go for figuring out how humans behave. We also, what we don't understand, nobody articulates this, is that understanding is narrative. It's not factual. We don't understand in fact. We understand in narrative. What that means is it needs to be a syllogism of fact one, fact two, fact three stringed together over a passage of time. A movie hits a lot more different than a speech does. There is a reason for that. So we are programmed to think in stories, is roughly what I'm saying. But largely, this whole idea of understanding yourself beginning in psychology books is fairly unfounded, even though you can borrow broad constraints from it. A lot of it's experiential and talking to yourself, establishing a sort of a communication line with yourself where you figure things out as they happen. And if you're sitting in your room, you're not experiencing the world in its glory. Like, one of the things that people must do as a bucket list item is find themselves in a culture by themselves where everything's the opposite. Everything, like everything's the opposite. And then figure out that, oh shit, all of this works. All of this is still beautiful. Like Colombia, the country, was an experience quite like that, where it looks, bro, I was sitting in Cartagena and it looked like Mathura or some shit. Like places where my family's from, Vrindavan and Mathura. Patli patli galiyan, log sadko pe khel rahe hain, sab scene hai, right? But the language completely different. The way they perform, almost every other part of their life is completely different. And you're like, wow, bro, कि एक system जिसके variables इतने अलग हैं मेरे system से, sort of leads to like common outcomes. Right? So, the process of figuring out who you are necessarily goes through the mirror that the world presents, and you have to experience that to know. That is where most of what I have to say comes from my own life. The books help, the academic and the ivory tower philosophers help, but that's about it.
So here's how I've taken it, is that the more I read about the concepts, and my attempt has never been to take it literally. It's be that, okay, let me try this out. Let me see if this works for me. And go with that level of, like, it's almost like scientific thought process. Like, this is not a short thing. It seems to work for someone. I'm not going in thinking it's going to work for me. Let me try it. Some stuff works, some stuff doesn't. And that's always been my way. And this honestly started off, I've had this, I think on my first couple of sessions with my therapist, and she said, and I used to always tell the world I have ADHD because I've always lacked attention. And at some point, the reason I even went to therapy was because I wanted to see if I was a fraud for calling myself as a person with ADHD all these years. So let's go to someone who can diagnose it. And she said, no, you don't. It's like, what do I have? She said, you have a case of just needing autonomy. You don't necessarily have ADHD. Your problem is not that you can't focus. It's that you don't want to focus when someone tells you exactly how and what you need. Like, the what is fine. How is your problem? Like, you tell me to go from A to B, मैं जाऊंगा. Tell me how to go from A to B. I'm like, no, fuck you. Like, I'm that person.
Relate.
Right.
Hard relate.
Because I'm like, I'll find my way. It's also like the only thing I follow is Google Maps. वो छोड़ के बाकी सब I will not conform. Is been my thing.
Google Maps and the Constitution of India for me. Two things I follow.
Fair.
Just putting it out there.
Fair. Yes. Well put. I will agree with you on that as well. On a public forum, I'm agreeing with you. In general, also, I agree with you.
Oh, that was a good one.
But it's that, right? It's that their willingness to just like experiment and find your way versus somebody has found the way, let me just follow that. I think therein comes the actual use case for, you can call it psychology, you can call it social science, basically understanding how you function and why you do certain things. Like, I have found that I am a lot more happy when I have a certain set of things which I do. One of which is that I don't try to do too much. When I'm, the attempt is, I'll be happier if I do too much, if I have too much. And it can be privilege, is because I'm also at a point where I've sold a company, I'm at a decent stage financially, I can say all this. So I always give that one disclaimer. But the chase to it was a certain thing. But today, you ask me, it's the fact that if I can get that period of time for me to not go that fast, but yet feel satisfied, that for me gives me more satisfaction. So it took me some time to get to that, because the honest thing is, you've done one thing, now you have to jump to the next one. How do I make sure performance is like up 200x? Because now I've done this at 100x, now you get 200. But I realize now for me, it's not 100, not 200x, I need to get 50x for me to be up. I think that's that experimentation to dig into it has been my journey, which continues to be my journey in this space. But the problem with self-help is it's seemingly foolproof, which it never is.
The church of more. Self-help is the church of more. Like, bro, I've been on record like shooting down ideas like NoFap, right? And I'm happy to shoot those ideas down every day for the rest of my life. Because
in NoFap, you cannot shoot also. Let's put it.
It's the absence of fapping, not even the presence. So what are you going to shoot?
Absence of shooting.
But the point is, how dare somebody invade the privacy of me touching my own PP?
Yeah.
Please, I need no opinions from you on that. But that's the joke part. The real part is, self-help is the culture of wanting more. And the absurdity of wanting more is very present in the NoFap claims, which is, it'll make you, how, like, I've seen videos that say you will make millions if you do NoFap. So the sale is wanting more.
Yeah.
And the fundamental idea is something completely absurd. all it is asking you to
Yeah.
do is be more disciplined, and in this case be more disciplined vis-a-vis your sexual urges. But all it is teaching you is discipline. It is teaching you the fact that you can do something about it, but what it is selling you is a completely absurd dream and a completely absurd cause and effect. And this is the case with self-help.
Yeah. And they're not even connected. If you look at it, not even connected by like miles.
Miles, they're not. The point is that it is a very convenient object of worship in the church of self-help, this no-fap situation. But what it points to is the same instinct for more. This is the American mind. This is the American dream codified into a religion, self-help. That this is the reason why
Which is now spread across the world.
because capitalism spread across the world. American dreams, capitalism, right? Capitalism on the ideological front, self-help on the individual front. So now that takes rounds around the world, you're like, हाँ self-help करना है bro, अपने को भी पैसा बनाने का है. And there is something somebody said a very long time ago about movements, about political movements and social movements that went, okay, I start a political movement. When does it end? When is the purpose achieved? What has been one political movement in the past that happened, eventually found that the purpose is achieved and disbanded?
No. None.
Or a company.
It doesn't disband. It
or
continues.
A company that found, I've produced a product, people love it, but now if I have to scale, I have to do unethical things. And we're like, you know what? We'll not scale. We'll just keep it at this.
No one.
Because there is, and this person calls this the embedded growth obligation or the ego.
Yeah.
You know this person?
I don't know, but that's a great way to define it.
You
to
would
define
love this
ego
person.
itself.
His name's Eric Weinstein. Listen to his essays. The ones he speaks out on his podcast, The Portal. And so Eric was very fond of coining words. He's the one who coined the word intellectual dark web for the Jordan Peterson type phenomena in the West, right? He was part of it too. And so what happens is, bro, you take up a very active approach in your 20s and your 30s towards success because for XYZ ABC reasons. And maybe like towards your 40s and your 50s, you start realizing maybe I like it a little slower. But because the world has convinced you, this is Manik Mana's point in Triptych, the world has given you no choice but to continue forward in a way where it must be scaled. It must be. Why else would you do it?
No.
That you cannot get off the bandwagon, the railroad. And this is what people must understand, is that they're part of the church of self-help when this is happening to them. This absurd dream of more satisfying you is the American dream being repackaged as self-help and sold to them. And in the Indian context, it's a way worse situation than in the American context. Because kya karoge yaar? So out and out, bro. Like one needs to chill. Like take a pause is a perfect plug here. Genuinely take a pause and think, is this what you want? Is this what makes you feel complete in any way?
Is this even necessary?
Have you heard of Porcupine Tree, the band?
Yeah.
There is a album. It's not an album. It's a musical piece called Voyage 34. Where this is, bro, you're going to love this reference. Okay, Voyage 34 is a recording of an LSD experience run in the 60s in America, behind which they make music. So the experimenter is like commentating on what he's seeing as sugar cube infused LSD is ingested by all these participants in the experiment, and he's talking about it. And then there is a point somewhere around part 3 where they get into a loop of, is this trip really necessary? And they keep saying that, is this trip really necessary? And that, like, because it's said so often in an echoey voice, and there is like progressive house music playing in the back with like guitar solos and like all that stuff happening, you begin to think, is this trip really necessary? Like you begin to think, is this trip really necessary? And so there is a cool psychedelic angle to this whole thing too.
Yeah. And the interesting part with all of this, right, is that I'm thinking about the entire conversation we've had, and I'm like, for someone listening, it's not like they're going to come away with, okay, I've gone through this. This is the core takeaway. Many things, people take different takeaways from it. And that goes for companies, that goes for any movement, is that there is no one core takeaway. There is a point where the worry is that it will fade out. We've been told that one curve, and the whole, like, because you have music reference, that whole like people dying at 27, which has always been glorified because they burn out rather than fade away, is always that, right? Is that, okay, you got to go so hard that either you go rocket ship forever or you will burn out. There is no curve down. And that for me is interesting. Someone asked me the other day, okay, now you've done this, you built Glitch, you've done all this. What's the next big project? I said, I'm living the slow growth life. And this person was looked at me in a very confused manner. I said, I don't want to do hypergrowth. Whatever I do next is slow growth. मेरे को नहीं करना है. Hustle किया है. I will continue to hustle, but I choose not to take some elements of the hustle I've done in the past into my future. I choose to slow down. But that is so contradictory to what people say that I don't. So the only response I got, okay, you young guys who've sold companies and want to go surf, was the response. It wasn't like, it seems like, okay, you lost ambition. But it's not that. It's that you realize at some point in time you can never. There is always going to be a point when that peak will come down. But the fight is that we don't believe that peak is near us. We believe that, nahi, abhi to time hai. I got time. I can push the envelope further. And I think that goes for every movement, individual person, is that we overestimate where our point of slowdown will come. So we try to push our envelope, which is where the whole problem is.
Bro, but like, look, if somebody said that to me, you're just a young guy who sold a company and wants to go, so I'd be like, yes. Like,
I said that. Yes, sir.
Huh. Or kya point hai? Like, you saw that episode with Vinamr and me, the Jin wala episode, right? And I have that small rant there when I'm like, kya build? Kya karna hai build karke? Right?
Correct.
Well, frankly, bro, I love building. Like, मेरे को ना और कोई चीज वो एनर्जी देती नहीं. Then I'm like, oh यार, एक नया, जैसे अभी हम लोग टेकीला की बात कर रहे थे. Right? I'm like, yo, like, that is really, I love that kind of stuff. But क्यों? कहाँ जा रहा है वो? What is the end? Where does the delta occur? Where does the river meet the sea? What does that look like? And that looks like a place where I'm more peaceful. And then I do things that, like, what I want to do after I'm done with building all of this and making my money is actually further human conversation, like discourse. I take up issues that have, say, for instance, haunted philosophers for a very long time and begin to profess my shit on that. Maybe it doesn't work, but the point is, I at least try to think beyond. And for that, I need a jungle house, bro, in Tulum, Mexico. Like, I need no place, no disturbance, no Wi-Fi, or I need like something in the Himachal beyond Parvati and Pin Parvati, right? Like where there is no one, I can sit and write for a very long time. That is the point, indeed. The whole point to make money is, one, to like pass it on to your kids and so on, so that they're fine. Especially jahan hamara social security is so off, you need savings in India. But beyond that, it is to have a break. It's to take a pause. That's the whole purpose.
Yeah.
Why else are you running this treadmill?
Yeah. What's the point? And I feel that the last, if I thought more people had got that a little bit more in the last couple of years, but what I'm seeing is muscle memory kicks back in, and at some point, a lot of that reflection has now seeped into the background. You're kind of going back into it, and the more and that's why if you talk to people today, I think the people's minds have also, like, you're grappling with 2 years of trauma. Let's admit it. We went through 2 years of trauma. We don't use that word. It was 2 years of trauma. We have all swept it under the carpet and said, reflex, get back to normal. Chalo bahar niklo sab. Right.
No
That
doubt,
is the
bro.
reason
In
I,
fact,
for instance, went back to therapy. I'm like, dude, I don't know how to go back out. I don't know. My mind is telling me, you're safe at home. Mat nikalna bahar.
I should make a course on how to go back out after COVID. But no, bro, you're spot on. Like, I stopped wearing good, decent clothes. Like, I'm always in shorts. I don't care about my hair. The only reason I do my beard is because my girlfriend like brings a trimmer to my room, be like, "Abhi kaat, ye bad rahi hai," right? Like, at this point, it's so, like, you are spot on. But more importantly, bro, and the trauma is not just 2 years of staying indoors. Indians particularly saw the worst of it, and that trauma, that 2 months from April, or rather 2.5 months from April mid to June end in 2021,
Last year,
that we've all swept under the rug, bro. Like, we do not see it. We only see residues of that when people post the pictures of their passed away relatives a year from then or 2 years from then. Bro, that was trauma. That was war, bro. And we sat through that. Nobody is willing to talk about it, because right now we have to get back up and get things going. Nobody has the time and patience to talk about it, but real trauma was there. Like,
and
we were all,
there's I don't know if you've ever read Mary Andrew.
no.
Mary Andrew, this poet, Mari, and I bought her books because I found her on Instagram. She's Adam Grant suggested her as his favorite Instagram poet, which I thought was a very interesting term. And then I got her books, and she says something in her book which she said when she was going through something in life, people kept telling her to be positive, like, uh, and she's like, I just want to be present. I want to feel what I'm feeling right now. The problem is we don't allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling if it's negative. Like, chalo na, let's be positive, move ahead, suck it up, let's go ahead, do this. Sit and cry, sit and talk about it. If you don't talk about it, na, you are going to be like, hey, rehega. It's there somewhere. It's in the background.
Bro, ऐसी बात नहीं है. Like, you remember वो गाना famous हुआ था, गजेंद्र गजेंद्र करके एक वो गाना था, क्या नाम था उस गाने का?
I thought you were going to
And
say
I
all
feel
is well,
so
but anyway.
No, and I feel so lonely करके गाना नहीं हुआ था? वो उसकी स्टोरी थी पूरी कि वो IIT का लड़का था, वो एक लड़की से प्यार करता था, फिर ऐसे 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 हो गया. This is like 10 years ago. It became very viral. Or do you remember that song तुझे बुला दिया from that movie with Ranbir and Priyanka?
I remember that one.
Bro, there is songs out वो gangster में वो गाना था, भीगी भीगी सी है रात, like, you know, all of this music. What is this music facilitating? Your long drive, you play that music and you are allowing yourself to finally feel sad about that breakup.
Yes.
So ऐसा
Which
नहीं
is
है.
why, if you realize one thing, and I want to just add one thing to what you said. I've always realized that when you talk to the general public, these songs resonate with them a lot more than what we perceive as more popular Dinchak songs. Because of this, what you're just saying.
Because of this.
It makes total sense.
Bro, so like the point is, grief will happen so rarely in your life. If you do not see the charm in it, you've missed out on an experience. And then you try to process grief secondhand by listening to KK sing a song, or like some other like dude sing a song. You're still doing well. You're still doing great. Like I've loved those moments where it's like, you know, when you're in high school and you like a girl, you have a crush on her, and you listen to these songs, and it's like so like butterfly. So you are letting what you're experiencing is a negative emotion as a positive emotion in that moment. What you've been told to think of as a negative emotion. Like when things get tough, one of the ways to look at it is, wow, this is an opportunity for evolution. Now, just saying that on a motivational level is like whatever, but notice where this is happening in real time. You are listening to Tujhe Bula Diya and you're thinking about that one girl you dated in BSc honors in Delhi University 10 years ago, and you're like, हाँ यार उसको भुला तो दिया वैसे.
I was that guy, and I don't think I was spoken about this. I was that guy who made it a thing. So I joined film school right out of after engineering, and I was that guy who would every night sit and have a lot of alcohol, take a camera in my hand, put headphones on, listen to music, and walk the streets and shoot stuff, and come back and do an edit, which would be this bizarre rendition of really bad poetry, which I would write, which is worst. But in college, it's like Varun is presenting his mind as cinema. If I look back on it, it's cringe. My friends all still make fun of me. You would have a breakup and you'd go fucking make this film. But it's that. It's just we finding ways to manifest it, but you're not finding ways to resolve it.
Yeah, but more importantly, the point is this is exactly how you would feel if you let yourself feel the grief or the sadness or the negativity or whatever. Like if you're tired, like I'm tired today, I can spend the entire day being like, Prakhar, tu kyun tired hai? Having that conversation in my head somewhere deep inside. Kyun tired hai yaar? Kuch karte hain. Nahi, kuch karna hai yaar. Aise khali nahi baithna. Or I can be like, chal dhoop mein jaake lete hain, aaj mauj karte hain. And that suddenly changes even if I'm having negative thoughts, the novelty of feeling down and out for me is so interesting. I'm very rarely down and out. All of these things, if there is, and so bro, here's what I'll tell you, because you've spoken about therapy a lot. This is a serious recommendation beyond all other recommendations. Go do 10 days of Vipassana if you haven't done it.
That's for me, the thought of that used to be a joke, but it's becoming so. I've always said that I will be that guy who will jump that gate on day one and run out. But I've thought, because I cannot say I have, as much as I want to chill, for me to be able to not have something to consume, something to do, some form of outlet is by far the most scary thing possible. And I have a fear of heights, and this still feels scarier. But it's there. It's a thought.
All the more
my mom's run it a few times, so she's given me the like, you have to do this. Please.
All the more a reason, bro. Like all the conversation you're having with your therapist, you will have a slightly different, maybe a very different version of those with yourself in that silence, because there is no avoiding stuff that you've been carrying in your head. And believe me, bro, I like the ADHD wala thing also. No, I've also always felt like I have ADHD, right? I don't think I have, but I have this. My number one bullshit detector mechanism is my boredom. I get bored like this. Like really quickly I get bored. Okay? And all my life I've gotten bored like this. And I had plans, bro. Day 7, day 8, I had plans, clear, concise plans कि मैं पगोड़ा में जाऊंगा जहां पे सब मेडिटेट कर रहे हैं और जोर जोर से फक चिल्लाने लगूंगा तो ये मेरे को खुद ही निकाल देंगे. फिर मेरे को निकलने की भी जरूरत नहीं है ब्रो. मैं वहां, मेरे ना सेंटर के बगल में जंगल था, ये विस्कॉन्सिन में सेंटर था. मैं उस जंगल में चला गया एक दिन लंच टाइम में, और मैं जंगल में जाके दूर जाके देखा नदी है, और नदी क्रॉस करोगे तो रोड है. तो मैंने प्लान बना लिया, जिस दिन बहुत हो गया ना भाई, अपने नदी से स्विम कर लेंगे, हम तो वैसे भी एक्सपर्ट स्विमर, एंड वील जस्ट एफ ऑफ समवेयर. All of those things I planned in my head. So you think you'll do that? Trust me, bro. The experience you're about to have is probably the most life-changing experience. And in a list of many things you can do to absolutely nuke your mind with new information. But the point is, there is novelty to that. When grief arrives in a moment like that about shit you've been carrying in your heart, wow, you're like, shit, I can feel this way. But it comes, if I get too spiritual, it comes from not being attached to your experience in that minute. If you're not attached to that experience in that minute, you can appreciate, like, you don't care if you watch a sad movie and cry. You're not like, yaar, kya rula diya. Sometimes you desire that. You're like, yaar, maza aa gaya, bilkul dil ko chhu gayi movie. Why is that different from मैं रो क्यों रहा था, मेरे को रोना नहीं है, मेरे को अपसेट नहीं होना, मेरे को तो हैप्पी रहना है? How is that different? It's because it's mediated through another entity in the middle. It's helping you process a personal pain by not making it private about you, so you cannot be attached to it. You are experiencing your own grief through Shah Rukh Khan's eyes.
Which is why we love
That's
Shah
all
Rukh Khan
that's
so
happening. It's still your private pains.
Which is why we all love Shah Rukh Khan so much. We've
You say, "I love
channeled
Shah
our
Rukh Khan."
pain and emotions through Shah Rukh in so many ways.
Bro, Shah Rukh Khan is the only guy who's loved by guys and girls in the same way. It makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me. He's a case study.
Yeah, he's a case study.
So,
And he's
yeah.
I mean, you can go deep into Shah Rukh Khan.
At some point, we can do a whole I have some parts about Shah Rukh Khan in the book.
The reason why I picked that earlier psychology one as well is because the self-diagnosis of being Dr. Google is one of our most scary traits in today's world. Is that, I have a thought about myself, I will Google it. The first thing I will see, because I won't go deep, I'll Google it, see the first thing which I see, and have self-diagnosed myself. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Is for me the most dangerous part of where this can really slide. When you try to, you're not understanding your mind, you're going for, again, like you use the word hacks, which I love, because that is the biggest problem we have. So you can't hack your way in life. It's like, look at the process of hacking now. Do you want to do that to your life, or are you like finishing your way? That's the, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the right word, but
constructing your way.
If you had to tell someone who says, I want to understand myself better, where would you tell them to start from?
Silence and isolation. In a different life, I would tell them to start from a different point, but I don't think the internet's ready for that conversation, particularly in our part of the world. But what you can do is begin with isolation and begin with silence. Like, you have to put yourself in a tougher spot than what you have right now. And I do not mean that on the level of finances and materiality, because I get the idea. That's a completely different equation. I mean in the sense where, like, even familiarity is lost. It's not about comfort. The word's familiarity. So escape even your own problems for a little second and isolate, and then see how the pressures of the wild world outside hit you and how you deal with them, and then find a way to rise back up. And silence helps because we talk too often to confuse our own selves, and silence leaves you with no other option but to confront yourself, right? And so start with silence and start with isolation, start with adventures.
There's that famous quote, right? It's saying the man's biggest problems come from him not being able to sit in a room alone with himself. And I forget who said it, but that rings so true. Which is actually the point of why people propagate meditation. But the problem with that is that we're doing now meditation about 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. You've hit that mark. Apple tells you 5 minutes max. That's all you can do, right? On the Apple Watch. But I think back and I was like, where would I get perspective even when I was a kid? Is because where I grew up was next to a beach. It's a beach town. Still have to get onto like a moped and go that far. But hardly weekday, nobody was there. So I would go park and just walk on the beach by myself. For me, that was that period of just being able to think without the noise, with just the sea next to me. So which is why for me today, if I ever want to get perspective, if I want to take a, for me to really switch off and like true pause for me is next to the ocean, because for me it's embedded in my mind since I was a kid that the sound of the ocean is facilitating my mind to kind of not take anything else in. It's also those triggers, right? You need some of those triggers which will kind of say, okay, this is what you're doing right now. Do you have one of those as well? Do you have a trigger?
I'm thinking. A trigger that sort of helps me reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think it's unfocused behavior, whatever it might be. Like even being at the gym is super unfocused in the sense that like when you're performing a set, you're focused on the movement, but beyond that, you're just walking, you're drinking water, right? um but more importantly for me, probably what it is being in strange places, man. So for like the next step I have in my future is over the next month after my lease gets over, I'll spend a entire month on the road. Like I'll just pick a few cities, find a way to get there and I the way I've always done is I've taken absurdly low budget.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do we make this work now? And so like what maybe that's just a source of inspiration for me. I've met so many strange people, man, now that I look back, because I had to hitchhike. And all I found was a white supremacist Bosnian Muslim guy who hated homosexuals in a car. And now I have to spend 5 hours with him where I do not know how to, like, he's playing like ancient Bosnian, like traditional music I can't make sense of. And that's part of where the inspiration sort of comes from. But I like hiking a lot, like in that limited respect. I like walking overall a lot. Like help me walk 7 miles and my mind's going to get clear. Talking also helps me a lot, and at this point I've earned the finesse where I talk very carefully for the most part. Like I make mistakes, no doubt, but for the most part I talk very carefully, and what I'm doing is really fixing the contours of my mind, my processing ability of my own narrative. um but in general, the sort of freedom that comes from unfocus is what I'm very fond of. That is my reflective moment in the day. I switch off, I tune out, and I'm like, now I'll let things happen to me.
There's something about chaos. I don't think chaos is a too hard a word. Something about being random that actually gives you clarity. I agree with that. While you're talking, I remembered when I used to work at MTV back in the day, I used to do this like long, like 10-15 day stretches in the office, sleep in the bunk bed, take a shower in the in the bathroom there and stuff. And I would suddenly once in a while put on my headphones, just come out of the office and just start walking in random. So it was not an aim to go somewhere, it was just an aim to just keep walking. And I would eventually reach some place and I'm like, okay, I think I would figure how to get back. Because this is, I think, pre-Google mapped Bombay. So you'd figure a way to kind of come back. But that point gave me, because I was doing something, I think it's also that cyclicalness of just you're walking. It's just that process of your body knows how to do it. So switching off that part of your mind that's controlling. And that's like it opens up so much.
Yeah, because your physical apparatus is occupied, and that is where most of your anxiety is in, like moving your hands and moving your legs, and you need something with your hands. Look, here is the other thing that modern culture does not understand is that you don't learn in your mind, you learn through your body. Like I can tell somebody intellectually how many times how to throw a cricket ball and spin it until their body learns this motion, it won't off spin, and in this motion, they won't leg spin it. Right? So your body needs to be involved for you to learn. That's how the machine evolved. Now we intellectualize learning completely through books, and what that does is you're stuck in a place where you have to think about something, but your hands and legs are not occupied, and so the anxiety builds up because that is how you approach the world, is with this. You know this how important this motion is to human behavior. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Nobody ever
Touch your
talks
finger
about
at it.
that.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that you can pinch, that your thumb is opposable, mind boggling. This is meant for you to control the outside world.
Yeah.
So walking helps in that way, where because at least your hands and legs are occupied, your mind can now be free. That's why people listen to podcasts when they walk. Like in New York, that's a huge culture. No, people are always walking. They don't have cars or in the subway, so their hands and legs are kind of occupied. Minimum mental cognitive load. Pata hai kaise jana hai office.
Correct.
So let's listen to a podcast. That is the thing. We don't learn as well because our hands, our legs are not. That's why we love playing when we are kids. क्योंकि वहाँ पूरा hands and leg तोड़ो इसको फेंको उसको. You are learning a lot more than your ABCDs in school.
And I have to ask you this because I realize that we've been talking for quite some time, over an hour at least. And in this show, I like to leave something for part two, part three. I feel this is going to have not a part two, part three. Many parts are going to follow on this conversation because there's a lot more to jam on. But how do you take a pause?
How do I take a pause?
Hmm?
I don't think I can tell on camera.
um,
No, I have a rule that after a certain point in the day, all stuff that keeps my mind focused needs to go off, and I need to get into unfocused time. And unfocused time is as like random as it can be. Look, we don't realize the power of a walk, right? Writers will tell you about it. That so much of the writing block gets solved because they walk. Unfocused thinking. Right, so I've been adding it more and more into my schedule, like long walks through the city as well. But after a certain point in the day, I submit myself to the forces of nature wherever it takes me. So for instance, tonight at around 8, I'll end up at some bar with a friend. We'll probably have a couple of drinks, and then at 9 maybe at a comedy thing. It depends on where the day is taking me. Also for artists, inspiration is so important, so you need exposure. But my taking a pause, largely also, bro, I think at 26 I can do without taking a pause for a few more years before I begin exhaustion. Right, like I should be running, but my pause means unfocused time where my mind can actually relax. Today is a different thing because the last few days have been so heavy, like I'm still fatigued from yesterday. I was up till 2 working till 2, and then I woke up, and then this stuff, right? So today what I'm going to do right after this is probably go out to the park and like just look at the sky, man. Like I cannot wait to sleep in the open or some shit like that. But that's usually what I'll do. But it changes from time to time, depends on my context.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Prakhar. There's so much to unpack in there, isn't there? You might actually, if you haven't caught part one, you got to go back and catch part one. There are so many things there. And the good part about conversations like these that are dragged long is that you don't have to agree on everything, but things open up in your mind when you hear and engage in conversations like this. And we're bringing a lot more conversations like this to you in the future, including a book club, which is coming up very soon. For that, make sure you hit subscribe and smash that bell icon. I'll catch you guys in the next video.